Welcome to the Untangling Web3 podcast, your go-to hub to learn insights and the latest developments in the wild and wonderful world of Web3. I'm Alec Burns.
And I'm Jack Davis. Tune in each week as we navigate and explore the rapidly emerging landscape of the Web3 technologies, projects, and ideas that are shaping the future of the internet.
We'll be talking to the best and brightest in the industry to keep uncovering insights,
so that hopefully we can all learn together on our journey to untangle Web3.
Welcome to the Untangling Web3 podcast. This is the second part of our conversation on AI and Web3. In the first part, we covered the history of AI, some introductory concepts, and in this episode, we talk about AI's overlap with Web3, some potential use cases and challenges of both disciplines.
We've talked about the content generation side, explainability. Yeah, you've got another one to talk about.
No, it's kind of linked to it. Like we've talked about content generation and authenticity. Like that's a really important thing. And you were talking about like micropayments, and like I think that payments in general is going to be a really exciting way in which Web3 and AI interact in the future. Like I don't want to excite the crypto bros who are potentially listening, but I do believe that AI right now needs a payment rail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, have you try to sign up to a bank account? How hard is that? Like the KYC involved is very difficult. Like there's no way we're going to have AI using traditional fiat or traditional banking anytime soon. But imagine like the possible use cases if AI could transact, if AI could make payments on its behalf. Like it makes so much sense for AI to have some kind of purchasing power. Like you imagine a world in which you just tell your AI model, okay, I want to create, the next best podcast, and the AI goes out there and it starts to pay for a StreamYard account. It starts to pay for a Figma account. It starts to generate content. But for all this to happen, it needs to have payment rails, right? And it's not just payment rails. These payment rails equal execution rails, right? It needs this to interact on the web and start to procure services to do things. And I think right now we have like a lot of human interaction. You prompt ChatGPT, it gives you something back, and then you can go action something. I really believe that we're not too far away from a future where you tell AI to do something like go make a website, and it just does everything. It pays everyone. It hires humans, non-humans, other AIs, and everything, all the interaction is covered. And I think the only way to get that is through Web3-based payment rails.
Yeah, I mean, I can again see a can of worms being opened and some problems with that if you start letting AI do all your subscriptions for you. But I mean, there are examples of that, I think, where there are AI tools that will look at if you give them access to your banking app and things, they'll try and cut out unnecessary subscriptions, things you pay for, like budgeting apps type thing. And also we mentioned, I think the finance industry is already it's probably way ahead in terms of giving AI money to do things with. I actually saw someone, I can't remember the name now. I'll have a look after the episode, but there is a fund manager who had quite a good track record in America, and he completely moved over to artificial intelligence about a year or two ago. Like he completely lets all his trade execution, all his portfolio management is done purely by computers. So he just gives it the money and lets it go. And that's, that doesn't need payment rails, as you say. It's an example of like letting AI just loose with money. But I agree. Like if you wanted to let that AI interact in the real world outside of the internal kind of trading platform that they're using, then yeah, payment rails you'll need. The other thing there will be, because we just talked about micropayments, right? And you're coming at it from the AI being able to pay people. I think the other way around is also really interesting. So using micropayments to pay for AI services. Like we saw what happened with a couple of months ago. Midjourney was one of the big, alongside ChatGPT. Midjourney completely took off. For those who don't know, Midjourney is an AI model it's a generative AI model that generates new images based on text prompts, and that's the one you see with all when we talk about those images being created earlier. That was Midjourney. Now they opened up a free trial for a good couple of months, and it blew up. They got so inundated that they had to completely stop the free trial. So I did use it once just to play with it, and then I got locked out. And then now they put it.
What did you generate, Jack?
I tried to generate a logo for this podcast, but it didn't go that well for me. I'm not a prompt engineer yet. But the fact that they had to go and cancel the free subscription, so close off this opportunity for many people and move to a subscription model for however much a month, I just thought that was a real missed opportunity for Web3 to be used, because you could say, well, if instead of charging £20 off the bat to use it each month, let's say, why can't I just pay 10 cents for generating one of these images? And that might have been a much better model to do it with.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that in a previous episode, right? It's like, so I pay for ChatGPT because, like I said, I use it for all aspects of my life, and I pay, I think, £20 a month or something like that. And I don't think I actually get that much usage out of it. I have like unlimited prompts and things like that, and it would make so much more.
You said the opposite this episode, Alec. I'm sure you can't go back on that now.
My mom's birthday is once a year, so it's not like I'm using it all the time. Like, I think, so you're right. Like, there's some people who are probably using it 1,000 times a day. I have no idea who those people are. I wouldn't want to interact with them. But there's like there's a bandwidth there, right? And I think it would be a much fairer model if you were paying per prompt, because that really is like what the kind of the burden is on OpenAI to maintain this, rather than just a flat subscription for everyone. And you reduce the barrier to entry there as well, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's also, I mean, at this point, it's worth mentioning probably and acknowledging, why did you say earlier that AI is quite centralized at the minute? It's these big companies. It's because it's so expensive to run. So, ChatGPT had, I have the figure, somewhere. It's, I think it's something like 1 trillion parameters in their model, and it requires gigabytes of data to train. But yeah, it's unbelievable the size of these actual machines.
Parameters, my God.
Yeah, I did have the figure somewhere. I have to double check, but it was something like 1 trillion parameters.
Wow.
And to actually, it's expensive. There's big GPU costs. There's big server costs required. I mean, even just to deal with the demand for the usage, let alone because it's taken off so much. I mean, ChatGPT got something like, I think it was like 4 or 5 days it took to get to 1 million users, and then had about 100 million within 2 months. So the demand on the systems just to run what they're doing is insane. And they have to fund it some way. So, if you're doing micropayments per call, that might make a lot more sense.
Yeah, I completely get it. I'm so for, like, I mean, it works both ways, right? Like humans, like I see in like the metaverse of the future, like we're seeing gaming applications coming out right now, non-player characters in big gaming environments. They're pretty crappy, or they have been pretty crappy up to now. And I think with these large language processors, right, we're going to have really exciting user experiences with these AI generated kind of NPCs. And I think, we should pay for them, even if it's a micropayment. And even if you just send like an AI into this world, and its entire goal is to just make money. And it says, okay, the way I make money is to go into this world and be the best damn NPC in this world, and everyone will tip me and monetize me. That's its goal. It's creating value. If people want to give it, micropayments, want to give it money for the value that it's creating there, it makes them feel happier, it de-stresses them, then it should be able to. And I think these kind of, these payment rails that we're talking about in Web3 are the perfect way to facilitate that.
You know what? You're making me think of a really nice convergence of a lot of what we've talked about recently on the podcast with metaverse and things, because I can now envisage being in a game or like in a metaverse environment where you have these NPCs, and you always have like resources in a game. You'll have certain items that you pick up. Like normally they're just coins, they're like gold coins, and you pick them up and you can do whatever. But what if you could use those coins to pay for interacting with the AI, right? And get them to do something. Maybe you could get it to generate a new quest for you, and you have to pay for that. And whatever the cool thing there would be, every time you talk to the AI, you could prompt it. So you could say, generate me a quest that takes me to this land, and I have to speak to certain people and do certain things, and it would generate a fun story around that. So it wouldn't just be like picking from a preset list of things it can do. It could generate on the fly tasks for you, and you could pay with the crypto.
It's going to be like, that world really excites me. Like, I get really like gaming excited about this. Like, I was playing D&D the other day, which, Dungeons and Dragons, with some friends.
For those of us with a life. So.
Exactly. And I was like, I had this kind of rough story that I was going to do, and I was like, I just plugged it into ChatGPT. I was like, make this better, like make it more fun, make it more exciting, make it darker. And my God, the story it came up with, I know that it's just aggregating lots of stuff out there, but it was the fact that within 3 seconds, I had this fully immersive story. Like, if I was playing the game and there was an AI in there that was capable of this, yeah, take my money. Like, I would love to do that. And I think everyone wins there. I don't see like it just makes perfect sense, right? This culmination of kind of payment rails in games, AI generating content. And I think this is one of the big things that we are going to see right now. We think of bots in Web2 as spam. And I think we're going to see, there's a lot of potential negatives, like the disinformation, the deepfakes that we've talked about how AI could cause problems in the future. But I think there's a lot of benefits that are going to come. And I think Web3 is really going to, positively affect how we interact with AI going forward. And I think in a way it's absolutely essential for it as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are, as we've said, there's so many opportunities for AI, and we want to realize those as safely and as ethically as possible. And there's a lot of talk about the ethics of AI right now. I mean, remember there was that letter going around that Elon and a bunch of people signed to say, we need to stop the training now because we need to think about the ethics of this because of all the types of things we've talked about. And I agree. I really see Web3 being the toolkit that helps us to use AI productively in the future and minimize bad actors. I mean, talking about bad actors, right? That's a big worry. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but this is a man called Geoffrey Hinton, who is often called the Godfather of deep learning. And so he invented so many of these things. He won the Turing Prize a few years ago, I think 2018, because of his contribution to the field. And he was at Google. He was very high up in the AI department or something. He quit Google recently because he was like, I need to, I know I've helped create this stuff. He's got like the Oppenheimer story, right? He's like, I helped create this stuff, but now I need to leave Google so I can speak freely about the risks to it. And he cites things like abuse of the system and if you use them maliciously. Another thing to note.
What kind of stuff, Jack? Like, what does it mean by abuse of the system? Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of ways. So, as we've said, one of them, an obvious one, would be just using it. It's lower the barrier entry to create spam. That's one example of abuse. Maybe and maybe take things like Cambridge Analytica further, influencing elections, etc.
Deepfakes, all this misinformation and stuff. That's the kind of things. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. Yeah, but there are ways that there are things that AI is uniquely susceptible to because of we described it's so dependent on the quality of the data you put into it, right? It's so dependent on that being how you train the model. And I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure. Oh, I'd be very surprised if it's not the case, but I'm pretty sure I read that it is, that ChatGPT and similar large language models, when you use them, they're constantly being trained. They're constantly improving. So it's not like they just it's a one shot. They just build the system. They let it loose. No, every time you use it, what you put in, it's learning from. And I'm 100% sure because you can rate
because
the
it's
response,
like value.
right?
Exactly, it's value up and down. Like every response is positive and negative. It will improve for everyone based on that.
Yeah. So when you click, was this a good response? You're helping train the algorithm, and the dark side of that is people could start poisoning that data set. They could start putting in things, telling the algorithm it's wrong when it's not, starting to influence the model itself. Now, I don't know how practical all of that is, but the fact that people like Geoffrey Hinton are worried about abusing AI in that way, I think speaks volumes.
Got you. And I think what I thought you were going to go towards then was like training bias, and I think maybe you have kind of alluded to it. It's like, okay, we were talking earlier about the voice recognition, right, and how certain dialects in the UK probably weren't recognized because the data set didn't cover Wales, the Black Country, and this kind of stuff. And I think realistically humans have bias as well, and I think that the difference is that in AI, we have the potential to actually read in and provably say, what is that bias? I think the point is, because it's not human, we kind of think, oh, it's completely neutral. There's no bias in that. But we have to realize, like, it is trained by humans and there's always going to be bias there. And I think that the potential, the beauty of this is that we do have auditability into that. We can say, okay, this seems to be biased. Is it biased? Let me look at the data set. Let me read into it using Web3, using the principles of blockchain. Why is it biased? Okay, that's why it's biased. I think that's something we have in humans as well that we need to recognize. Like, there is the potential to be biased there, but that's a lot more difficult to kind of define, right?
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And that I'm glad you mentioned the bias point. That is important, because we go back to this idea that AI doesn't exist in isolation. It is created. It is being trained. There are people hand labeling the data set, so people will be looking at outputs and not just you when you use it, but people are paid to rate the responses of these things, or to check if certain outputs of other models are correct. And it's worth noting that how far do these systems go? They can go a much further, do much more powerful things, and we live in a global world, to be very incredibly cliche. And as much as we're talking about being ethical with AI, and there's Europe in particular and America are talking about regulations for AI, I think quite rightly. Another danger and another abuse vector for it is that not everyone will necessarily subscribe to the same view. People, if a lot of the world self-regulates, there will always be other countries or subsets of the world that don't, and then can go full force and using it for malicious purposes, which is, I think, one of the things they're worried about.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned this, because, like we're saying, there's who sets the limits, right? Like, this is a big problem for ChatGPT. You were talking about how people are poisoning data sets, putting in bad prompts, like asking for hate speech. How do I, I think what someone told me that they were like, there was this example that they did on Reddit. They're like, how do I kill the most amount of people for $1 or something like that? And in a previous version of ChatGPT, it would answer that question. And one of the big developments moving from GPT 3.5 to 4 was around the safeguards and making sure that there's a lot more ethics involved. But then the problem there is, who defines the ethics? Like, this is going to become like a commoditized service, like a public service, I think, in the future. And who are OpenAI to define what is ethical and what is non-ethical, right? You think about the politics. Like, I've seen a lot of people where they're saying there's a massive bias against the Republicans in ChatGPT 3.5, and one of the pushes for 4 was to kind of equalize that bias, right? But this is so tricky. Like, ethics are very subjective. They change from country to country, from person to person. There's no such thing as universal ethics. Like, the UN's Human Rights Act's probably as close as we come, but that's not accepted by every country in the world. Like, when he's talking about a global interoperable world, how do we define ethics? How do we safeguard? How do we define standards when there's so many people? Like, we don't agree on them. Like, no one agrees on what, like, the standards should be. So how can OpenAI define it for everyone to use it?
Yeah, and we're getting into the realm of the philosophical now, right? And Web3 technologies I don't think they'll solve all these problems. Even, they won't solve everything. Lots of them they won't even solve to a satisfactory degree, potentially, but we just don't know yet. But I still see Web3 as the best toolkit to addressing them, at least in the short to medium term, and providing as much of the infrastructure for identity, authenticity, and having evidence of what happened in these systems. I fully believe that.
I think I need to look more into why Geoffrey Hinton left Google. Like, I remember seeing that news article come out and being like, "Oh God, this is big." The only thing that I heard, I think this was pub talk, basically, with one of my friends that's kind of in this space, and I think he told me his big fear was around the war aspect. He was like, a lot of the funding for AI is coming from the military, like the US military. Like, it's always the way, right? Like, they push big into robotics. They're big in DARPA, big into Spot, all these kind of AI enabled robotic systems. And he was like, he didn't want to work for things that could potentially be used to kill people, or like be used for militaries, no matter what military it is. And I think I want to know more detail about what kind of fears he has, right?
Well, I do recall what the kind of key ones were. So the first one was around the misinformation piece that we've already talked about, how it will just reduce the barrier to flooding misinformation everywhere. So we've kind of covered that in detail. The other one, which I guess surprisingly haven't really come up. I mean, maybe we talked about it with digital marketing and stuff, but the potential job replacement and the automation of tasks, because again, we're seeing things like ChatGPT simulate human tasks pretty well now, and I think that's the biggest consumer worry right now.
Yeah.
Actually, the one that's in everyone's minds is this going to replace my job? We've seen, I think, was it BT? I saw them saying they were laying off something like 20,000 staff in the next few years
Oh
and
yeah.
replacing it with AI. And companies are going to go this way for sure.
This is a huge topic. Like, so IBM said the same. They were basically said they're going to put a complete freeze on any job that could be replaced with AI until they have worked out whether it can be replaced by AI. But I think, like, we kind of talked about it before. This happens all the time, right? Whenever there's a new technology that everyone thinks is going to be revolutionary, like the computer, like industrial robotics, all these things, one of the first concerns is, okay, how is this going to affect us economically? Is this going to lead to mass unemployment? And it hasn't so far. People adapt. I think one of the fears is that the rate of change means that we're gonna be playing catch up, which I suppose they tend to do. But I think more and more, as we're kind of pushing humanity away from laborious tasks, we can push them more and more towards, tasks that potentially add more value. I guess in my mind, if we think there's a pot of money for the NHS, which is the healthcare system in the UK, right, and say you can replace 10% of jobs with AI and save, 99% on cost or something like this, right? And it's the, administrative tasks, maybe. It's like the filter gates. Like a big problem in the NHS right now is the filter. People come through and they ask to say, like, they don't really actually have any serious ailments. They come through, they ask lots of questions. Like, to have like an AI filter initially that can just say whether you need further kind of checks or need further tests, or you're just fine, you go back. Like, that could save a lot of cost. But like I was saying before, there's a pot of money. If you could save some money by removing some of these jobs and then push more money to other jobs, like more nurses, more like the kind of the jobs that say maybe create more value in that sense, like, is that not a benefit overall?
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I see a lot of the talk about mass unemployment now from AI as similar to the Gary Kasparov moment about the death of chess. It doesn't bear truth in reality, and there's a very heartening statistic. I don't know the number exactly, but it's something like more than 50% of the jobs we have now didn't exist 10, 20 years ago, whatever the figure is. But it reflects the fact that employment changes over time. The jobs now are very, very different to 100 years ago. So just reducing some jobs and, minimizing certain types of labor is going to be replaced with other jobs. And it's interesting because I think what's different now is it's changing a lot of desk-based work that is written, and the UK has tons of this. This is a huge part of our employment. The information knowledge work. It's really having a big impact on that, and I think that's partly why people are making such a fuss about it, because the industrial revolution replaced a whole bunch of jobs. We don't have people manually doing every part of the car manufacturing anymore, and we're doing just fine. I think the same is happening, but people, it's more in people's minds because it's affecting a different type of people now. It's in different types of jobs, which is interesting. But yeah, I don't see it as really changing. I don't think it's going to make everyone unemployed in the near future.
It is very interesting. Like, I follow a lot of American politics. I remember seeing this Republican candidate basically say, yeah, AI is going to change the world. But like, his fan base was effectively like working class people. And he was like, but it won't change the world. We'll always need, farmers. We'll always need laborers. We'll always need welders, construction workers. AI will never affect those jobs. So you're safe, and I'll make sure you're safe and you're secure. And you're completely right. It's like a dynamic shift. This is one of the first times that like maybe a technological advancement has really come for, desk-based jobs and kind of people that would think of themselves like middle class, upper middle class, and all these things. But yeah, again, I think it's just that the emphasis is going to change. Like, I see stats where it's like, we're going to lose 150,000 jobs. And then like the subtext somewhere is like, but it's going to create 150,000 jobs elsewhere, right? I think we're just going to see more productivity overall. I think like a big example of this is coding. Like, oh my God, the way ChatGPT has advanced like software development and coding is crazy. Like, one of the guys that I'm really good friends with, software developer, he's like, I can do a task now that would take me a month in basically a day by prompting ChatGPT. And it's not like his work's gone away. He's just way more productive. And I think those kind of like areas have a lot to gain from this.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the right word. It's increasing productivity essentially. I mean, what it can do to automate, coding and stuff. Like people, again, a different sector that's being targeted by this advancement in AI would be people who are just experts in a coding language potentially, who would just write code and don't necessarily define and design systems, because you can ask you can ask one of these machines to say, okay, write me the code for a website. And yeah, right now, you're not going to trust ChatGPT to write all your HTML and CSS for your website. But I definitely think in the future, it will get good enough to do that. And I think that's just another interesting dimension to the whole thing, is all these different types of jobs that are under threat.
And I think it's going to lower the barrier to entry. Like, imagine if you're a startup and you're like, okay, I need to hire 5 software developers to do this thing, like create a website with all this back end stuff that's going on. And that's going to cost me like 250 grand. And then all of a sudden, ChatGPT comes out, it's like £20 subscription. You can do it. And you're like, oh my God, finally, my dream's been realized. I can create a website, make a startup. And I get it. I get the fear. And I think it's kind of the fear of the unknown. Is my job at risk? What does my life look like? But I think, as with almost everything so far, like, this is the best time to be alive ever, period. And that's because of technological advancement, right? And I think there's always a fear with the unknown. But humanity so far, based on, the million or 20,000 years of human civilization or whatever, it's gotten better. And I do think it will get better. And I think, society is definitely going to change. It'll be hugely impacted. Like, this is going to be, AI is going to be one of the most hugely impacting things since fire, potentially. But I'm excited from it overall. I realize there's going to be a lot of problems in the same way fire can burn a house, it can cook food. But I think overall it will be a massive net positive for humanity.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I had a point that I was thinking about, and it's just I've just lost it. It will come back to me.
Is it more of the Geoffrey problems?
No, what I was going to say, actually, I've just remembered, is what I was going to say was, what another way we could describe all of this, like increasing productivity, is increasing efficiency. It's making it more efficient to do things, which is an incredibly Web3 idea, as we've discussed. It's lowering the barrier to entry, is just increasing the efficiency with which you can achieve task X, Y, Z. So yeah, it's going to make it a lot easier to do certain things, and there'll be big winners from that. There'll be companies there are companies being built just to solely leverage AI. I mean, that word leverage in itself is why everyone likes software and software as a service. You get high leverage from it. You build something once, you can deploy it many times. AI gives you leverage to your brain. The people who are better at using AI will do the best from it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, I'm sure you have, but as soon as ChatGPT came out and GPT-4, there's a whole new terminology around prompt engineering as a job. And I've seen job adverts for hundreds of thousands of pounds for prompt engineers, people who are the best at wrangling the best responses out of the AI. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, it is a skill. And I think I saw someone say that it's the same skill as human interaction, in the same way that a salesperson will be a wordsmith. They'll know exactly what words to use to make people feel more comfortable in making the sale. Like, it's just like that. Like, it's about how do you use the right words to get the most out of ChatGPT. It's quite an interesting paradigm shift, right? But I love this idea of like a prompt wordsmith. It's so interesting that people are pushing this as a career choice now.
ChatGPT is like Aladdin's cave, and you've got to whisper the right words into it to get the gold.
Oh my God, that is the nerdiest reference we've had so far. And I was talking about D&D earlier as well.
Yeah, well,
one of the problems with this, like, you're talking about efficiency, and I find it super exciting. But I also, is there a part of me that thinks, okay, is this going to turn dystopian? Have you seen the film WALL-E, where humanity is completely kind of supported by robotics and AI, and we no longer have to engage? Is that a humanity of the future? And that's a potential, right? Like, that's scary. As we kind of offset more and more of our daily tasks and thought processes, does it mean we're freed up to do more of what humanity wants to do, which is like being creative, artistic, all these kind of things? Or do we actually need to work? Do we actually get pleasure from, the grind and graft of, the work that we're doing now? And this is, I think, there's two separate camps. I think maybe more the technologist people think it's going to be a utopia, and then more people, there's some people that think it might be a dystopia where it's we're offsetting too much.
Yeah, I've seen both, definitely. I mean, people like I think Naval Ravikant, who is kind of on the money on a lot of things. He definitely sees it going in that creative utopia, but the only jobs left will be the creative pursuits, which actually goes against what we were saying about the risks to creative people. Actually, when everything else is automated, they'll just be production of new works of inspiration. So things from actual human thought, and then the other people who are more worried. But yeah, I don't know which way it's going to go, because that brings up a whole other conversation, which I don't think we'll have today, about things like universal basic income, right? Because if there's only creative work to do, then you will need to subsist in some way. But your point actually takes me very nicely and neatly onto the third and final one of Geoffrey Hinton's big concerns, which is about AGI or AGI, the artificial general intelligence, the big kind of specter that some people are worried about. This is the Skynet. This is the
singularity, right?
The singularity. So how far do they go? When it's not just a happy, helpful chatbot, and when do the machines take over? And I don't feel qualified to have a view on this. I feel like it seems implausible, but then so did ChatGPT until recently.
So I've had a lot of maybe pub conversations, some sober, some not so sober, and I feel like I've talked about this a lot. Like, this is the first time in maybe a million years at which human brain power may not be the most intelligent driving force in the world, right? There is the possibility that this AGI could come out that is way beyond our comprehension, that we can't keep up with. And that bit kind of scares me. Is it possible? That is a topic that is massively up for debate. Like, I'm someone who subscribes, and this is getting very philosophical. I'm someone that does not subscribe to the fact that humans are particularly special, that we have this incomprehensible soul thing that makes us different, right? I believe that you could track our evolution from like a single-celled organism, which could very easily, I think, be mapped by an AI to something as complicated as an ant, which I think could be mapped by AI, to something as complicated as a dog, which could probably be tracked by AI. Why is there something that's all of a sudden super special? It's just that we're slightly more complicated, slightly more difficult to map. And I do subscribe to the fact that AI does have the potential to, evolve to the singularity. And that's scary. It is scary, I think, overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to rein it in from the philosophical in just a moment. But I think I broadly agree with you there. When you start thinking about things like free will, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about AGI. Like, can something have free will? And there's a kind of a growing movement around whether or not free will exists for humans. There's a lot of people who will describe humans as wet robots now. And there's the science kind of supports that interpretation, even if like our experience in perception, in terms of our own perception, might feel different. A lot of the science actually supports that. Like, I mean, I won't repeat everything. You can go and listen to Sam Harris; he'll tell you all about it. But I think we're wading too far into other topics now. So why don't we just
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we should just become Sam Harris's podcast one day. Not that we would have any chance of that, but let's just maybe close off this discussion by getting back to like the concrete use cases, right? We've littered them throughout, but maybe why don't we just talk for a bit about our favorite ones? Like, what are you most excited about at the minute?
Favorite ones. I think the most tangible one for me is around like training AI, basically. And when we talk about data ownership, how we train AI and what that means for privacy. And I think to put it into like really tangible terms, like imagine healthcare. Like, everyone wants the best healthcare available, right? But when you look at the statistics around, when people get polled about, are you willing to give up your personal private healthcare data to improve, say, the standards of health checks? So a good example would be around, cancer treatment. Okay. So I talked earlier about how we're using AI already to basically analyze scans to see, okay, does this person have a tumor? Do they have cancer, or are they fine? Is it benign? Right. But people don't, if they had the option, most people in that instance wouldn't want to give up their personal information along with the scan, even if it benefits the process overall. So I think we're going to see a process where we can start to use some of the technologies we've been talking about before, where users own their data, they own their scan, right? It's authenticated, signed off by a doctor, say, yeah, this is a real scan, to make sure that, the data set that we're actually using isn't poisoned or toxic or bad, as you were talking about earlier. And they can disclose the details of the scan with the authentication without the personal identifying information in that. Okay. So when we start to think about this on like a wide scale, then the AI has access to a lot of data, a lot of, okay, this scan is good, this scan is bad, that kind of data, right? The data it actually cares about, and none of the personal identifying information. And quite importantly, it's been authenticated and signed off by a trusted doctor. So it knows the data is good overall, right? And then that allows us to create like a very, potentially successful AI model, so we can start to actually get, positive and negative outcomes from these scans in future. And then when it comes to the actual testing, this is my scan that I've now got. All I have to reveal to that AI model is my scan, and it will tell me the probability that this is good or bad. I don't need to reveal that personal identifying information. And I think in terms of training and outcomes, I think this kind of process we're describing here is going to be super beneficial. It's going to alleviate a lot of problems with, the authenticity of data going into AI models. It's going to help feed into a lot of the trust that is a big issue with how AI is done right now. And it's going to lead to a lot of better outcomes overall.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can beat healthcare, to be honest. I have to completely agree with you, right? I'm fully on board with that. I think is where it can have the most positive impact and benefit for society, especially with this move to, I think, preventative healthcare is that's the key, I mean, especially with
people I think people are quite scared of the idea of big data, especially with preventative healthcare, right? Like, you don't want to be monitored. You don't want your data monitored all the time, even if it means you're going to have a healthier outcome over your life. If it means that, big corporations have information about, when you go into the toilet and these kind of things. It's interesting. I actually went to a conference like not too long ago where there was this guy who basically created a device where it monitors all of your urine and stool samples constantly. And he was like, we can detect, how healthy someone is throughout their life, and the preventative outcomes are incredible. It was like, people don't want to sign up to it because the idea of data, companies connecting that kind of data is super scary. But I think we could see a paradigm shift that comes in as we say, okay, no personal identifying information will be revealed. It's purely about, the actual, biomedical stuff that's going in for the outcomes. And I think this could lead to like very successful solutions.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that there are also there's such a diverse range of ways you can use AI in healthcare. Everything from like the triage process, as you said. I mean, we're from the UK. The NHS is on its knees. It's so understaffed. It's not a case of replacing jobs, to be honest, at the minute in the NHS. It's literally a case of filling a gap in being able to help people and prevent, help people work out if they need to come to the hospital or go to the doctors, or what they need to do without having to use these preciously scarce human resources that we have and are losing in the NHS.
And like, call centers do this already, right? And like, I mean, everyone is infuriated with how bad call centers are. But why aren't healthcare services using it? It's obviously effective, like it works. And if you're saying I can save X amount and get the right people to the right places by using this system, there's obviously a benefit there.
Yeah, 100%. And then you've got the whole, things to do with training, medical trials and training data or training models with data for medical trials. I mean, what we saw with COVID and how fast we had to respond to that and understand the virus. This field of protein folding has been around for years, right? And using machine learning and it's just being used even more every day to solve those kind of problems, to detect cancer and things. And I think where Web3 and AI can intersect really nicely is in that. I think, as you said, like permissioning the data to be used in medical trials, because if people know it's being used for a certain thing and know they can use it, they can give that data privately. People do that right now, but it's not on the scale that you'd need. So you think about your heart rate monitor, your Apple Watch or something. that's taking constant readings throughout the day that you're not necessarily sharing, or you're not incentivized to share. You can share it, but you're not necessarily, it's not going to the right places. Whereas Web3 and AI together will basically provide the incentive model to say, oh no, I will happily pay, be paid to give that data away. It'll also help with things like, then insurance providers will then lower premiums for if you provide data and things like that. So I think, there are just so many applications in healthcare.
And I think that what you just said reminds me of that. There was that kind of flu outbreak app that Google worked on, right? Whereas like they were trying to work out where there was flu outbreaks based on people Googling symptoms. And they were like, the problem with that is the bad data. They were like, there's a flu outbreak in every city, basically every 10 minutes, because there's constantly people that are just saying, am I ill? Am I ill? So like, it's kind of interesting. That's come back up, but it's all about the quality of the data, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of even go back to the Apple Watch thing, right? I think the systems on there, which are all AI supported now, things like fall detection. So that was when I first saw Apple Watch, and I think it's pivoted to a health device from it previously being like this is a fun thing you can read your messages on and take calls on. There was a moment where it really became like, this is a proper health device, when they integrated the fall detection. So if you fall over and it'll give you a prompt to say, are you okay? And if you're not okay, then it'll call emergency services for you. And I was like, wow, that's huge. Like that's something that everyone in the world can use, especially older people who might fall in the home and not have anyone around. That solves such a big problem for people. And I know it's not the kind of AI like the ChatGPT stuff that we've been talking, but it's still going to be things that are supported by the underlying Web3 technologies in the future, I'm sure, about with blockchain, how it's being used. Because fundamentally, I think you can expand the space of possibilities, like the different places you're using the AI, if you're using it with these balances and checks in place. So as soon as you implement the blockchain auditing and things and the evidence trail, then you can expand what you're using it for and solve different problems with it.
Yeah, that's nice. That's like a super nice note to end the use cases on. So like, what do you think the future of AI looks like with the Web3 aspect in mind? Like we've talked about a lot of things. Like what are the key points for you, and what are the things that excite you most, do you think?
I think I've probably mentioned most. I mean, in AI, whenever you talk about it, you're out of date within 10 minutes. So who knows, by the time this comes out, maybe the future would have been realized. But I think I'm most excited by the economic and the markets that it can open up. So, we talked about how it might replace certain jobs. And I think Web3 is actually going to open up. That's going to be the real key that opens up many, many new jobs that we don't know about, the micropayment economy, all these new types of job, types of work, types of business model that are facilitated by Web3, by micropayments. I think that is going to be really interesting because it's going to create all these new types of jobs that will maybe being used with AI. You might have micropayments to be labeling data and interacting with the AI. That could be a job, right? To help improve AI. I don't think that's the most exciting job. But I just think the combination of AI improving efficiency in existing kind of arcane jobs that can be automated, and then Web3 replacing those with new markets that opened up by what you can do by tokenization, by data sharing. I think it's going to be exciting to see them kind of pass the baton from one another, so to speak. But I know it's not very specific. Right, but
so general. The thing that you're most excited about is efficiency improvements.
Sorry, that's really okay. That is really boring.
It's fine.
I'm really excited. I'm really excited for Netflix to get a better recommender algorithm because it recommends me rubbish. So if that could be a really good crossover as well. So if Netflix started at the minute, they have a recommender algorithm, which is an example of AI. It's some tooling in AI is used to do that. And they try and give you recommendations based on what you've watched before. But there are all sorts of other things you could do with Web3. You could do recommendations that are weighted by how much you were willing to pay, how much of it you're willing to pay per micropayment for, how much you they might be able to do it using other data sets that you permission and share from a different source. So at the minute, they have to do recommendations purely based on what you do in the app, but you might be able to connect your activity on IMDb or on a different streaming, because there are like 20 different streaming providers now, right? So they don't know about each other. They don't share data necessarily. But if you could then share your data set with them all and say, okay, I'm going to tell you all what I'm watching, and then you can recommend me better stuff, that would be quite good.
So you can spend more time at home watching Netflix and other streaming platforms.
Less time scrolling through really bad recommendations.
Efficiency improvements, always.
Efficiency.
So I think there's two for me. One, with my like nerdy gamer hat on, one is the AI content generation. Like the idea of having in these kind of metaverse gaming worlds, little AI bots that, like you said, can like spin out incredible stories, can interact real time, can provide like really cool feedback and exciting kind of dialogue and exciting kind of actions and all this kind of stuff. That stuff I find really exciting as a gamer. The other stuff is more like the business aspect, the payment rails. When we start to get AIs that can, commerce and exchange and buy things and like subscribe, and you can just imagine a world where you just go to an AI and you say, make this business for me, set it up for me, or make this product for me, and it just goes out there, actions, it sends the funds wherever it needs to go, and you just get these like incredible projects, these multifaceted projects that are just like set up by this AI. I think that is just an incredible idea.
Yeah, I've seen a super talented developer who basically implemented this exact idea, right? And he combined he can basically he built an app that you can speak to Siri on, and you can say, hey Siri, make me a, I've just said hey Siri, so everyone listening on their speakers will now have just been paused by Siri. They'll say
right?
Clickbait. So they'll say, hey Siri, can you make me a new website for this type of product? It should have a login, it should have a database to manage users, etc. And then in the background, it gets all these other generative models to write the code, deploy it automatically, do all the CI/CD. It's insane. Like that's already exists. You can just speak and it becomes so. Yeah, I think that's definitely exciting, but it's old news as well, Alex. So
it's exciting. So like there's a utopian future and a potentially dystopian future, but I think overall I see a utopian future, and I think it seems like you do too. And I think we're excited about the potential of AI and also the potential of Web3 to support AI going forward. And I think the overlap for me is one of the most exciting things.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's a good place to end. We've covered everything from AI and Web3 to the existence of free will in one episode, and now it's time to sit in a dark corner and cry.
Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Untangling Web3, produced by Emma Camilleri.
Don't forget to send us your thoughts, questions, and comments on social media, and be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast provider to catch the next episode. See you next time to untangle a little bit more of Web3.
The views we express here are our own and do not reflect the views of our employers.